Welcome, Patrick Ford, to an Ask the CISO interview here at Cybercrime Magazine, sponsored by Fortinet. Thank you so much for coming down today.
Oh, my pleasure, Georgia. Thank you very much for having me.
We're very excited to have you here. You've got a really interesting background. I know you started in cyber at the FBI, so is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about that and how you got involved in cybersecurity.
Well, before we even had the cyber division, I started out in the Internet Fraud Complaint Center, which is now the IC3.
IC3, that's in West Virginia?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And the FBI, like many organizations, didn't quite have a handle on it at the time.
What year was this, if you don't mind me asking?
2000.
Okay.
So it was early.
It was early.
It was early. And cyber was a tool, but it wasn't the crime. Mm-hmm. So we created the Internet Fraud Complaint Center to centralize all the complaints, all the different incidents.
Yeah.
Because they were very dispersed, and then we could create a bigger case to bring in all the decentralization of it. So it was important.
At this time, would you say that internet crimes were more someone copied my website, this is my property, this is my intellectual property, or was it, hacks and breaches, or was it virus attacks? I mean, what was it back then?
It was primarily we had the hacks and the breaches, which were being handled by the NIPC, the National Infrastructure Protection Center. But the frauds themselves weren't being centralized. We had, at the time, the Beanie Baby fraud was a big one. People buying Beanie Babies and they weren't getting delivered. But we also had much bigger crimes. We had the pump and dumps, where we had people posting false information about stock.
Oh,
they would boost the stock, and then they would sell.
So people believed everything that they were reading, and things. That's a major problem. Yeah. So fast forward through the different industries you've worked in. I know you were at Pfizer. What other industries were you in besides healthcare?
I was also at Aetna. I was the chief security officer at Aetna, so healthcare itself. And then I joined Schneider about 3.5 years ago, which is a very diverse company. It's an energy management company primarily. And
I read automation as well?
Yes, process automation.
Process automation, wow.
Very involved in a lot of verticals: healthcare, oil and gas, auto industry. So very water industry, very diverse.
How many countries is Schneider in? Do you know off the top of your head?
Just about all. About 150, about 170,000 employees worldwide.
So as CISO of the Americas, that's the North and South America, so including South America.
Correct.
Okay, so that's almost half the globe in and of itself.
Well, it's a good third market-wise.
Wow. And how many employees do you have under your purview that help you support your cyber program?
It varies because a lot of them are embedded within the business. But in the network side, globally, I'd say about 50 people globally. Oh,
so on a day-to-day basis, how much interaction do you do with your local team?
Constant. We work cases together. We work programs together. Although we've tried to complement each other. I've tried to build a team that complements. We don't want everybody doing the same thing.
How do you go about hiring them? Yeah, the different skill sets. So you're diversifying it a bit. How do you go about finding them?
We find them in the business. We find them in the schools. We find them in graduate programs. We work with local colleges. I work with some of the local colleges in the Boston area, trying to identify talent. We have internships that I put together this year. Would be an internship.
Okay, cool.
For college. We have other areas in the company that also do internships in the cyber area. Not just security, but the technology portion of it.
Sure, like the IT.
Correct.
Aspect. So one of the biggest challenges, I'm guessing, as the CISO at Schneider is the fact that the company acquires a lot of companies all the time,
right,
and is merging with a lot of companies all the time. So tell me a little bit about how you manage ensuring the cybersecurity of these companies that you're going through the M&As with.
It varies depending on the company we're looking at. Sometimes we can get involved early and have during the due diligence process and have a good look, so to speak, behind the curtain. to see how they handle security, and how important it is in the company with their culture. Other times it's post-integration or post-purchase, but prior to integration. We generally follow a NIST framework. We compare that to their life cycle and where they stand on the NIST framework. We compare that to Schneider, and we ensure that before they integrate with Schneider, that they meet a minimum standard, so to speak, that they can connect to us safely, and we can connect to them safely to ensure that IP is safe.
Gotcha. What would you prefer, the before or the after? I mean, how do you go about the due diligence that you're doing when you do the M&A process? Would you prefer that they come to you, just kind of out of the box, perfect cybersecurity program, or would you prefer that Schneider go in and kind of customize the cybersecurity program?
It's a combination. If they stand alone, because there's different types of integrations or different type of acquisitions, sometimes and different levels of integration with Schneider. Sometimes the business itself wants to brand them, and we buy a good business and they have a good brand name, and we want them to stand alone.
Gotcha.
Or we just want to support them with our back office, so to speak, the ERP and the HR, but still keep the innovation. We're buying for innovation. We're buying for their capabilities, and we don't. Schneider's a big company. We buy a company with 40 people, or 100 people, or 200 people, where security or the bulk, so to speak, of a big company could really hinder the innovation that you're really going for.
Gotcha. So I'm guessing that when you first started in the field in 2000, there were maybe one or two cybersecurity companies that we could name, but now you're dealing with so many vendors in the marketplace. I mean, I was at RSA a couple of weeks ago. There were over 700 vendors on the floor. I think based on some research I've done, there's between 3,000 and 4,000 cybersecurity vendors in the marketplace. As a CISO of a global company, how do you go about choosing the right vendors to work with?
Well, I can tell you it's grown by my inbox. I probably get 100 to 200 emails a week easily, soliciting.
Marketing emails from companies,
emails.
Yeah. How do you deal with all of that? Do you just delete it, or do you pay attention to some of it?
I pay attention to some of it.
Okay.
There's certain areas that we are interested in, and I'll reach out and just do a brief demo or 30 minutes to learn about the company and how they can innovate. It is a challenging. Finding the right partner is challenging. I think obviously references your other CISOs and who they're using. It's a very disruptive environment. If you look at the Gartner quadrants, from year to year, it changes drastically.
Right.
So picking the right partner that's been there for a while, knowing that they're going to innovate with you, and quite frankly, work with you to integrate is really important. Ideally, you'd love to see them replace something, or at least complement what you're doing already. So that's really important.
So you said that if it was an area that you were interested in investing or growing in your cybersecurity infrastructure, so what are those areas that you're looking at right now for 2019? Because other CISOs are watching and they want to know, what you think are the priorities.
So there's always anomalies in the network, threat prevention, threat identification, user behavior in the network. I think those are areas with a global company like Schneider. Privacy is a big issue. Globally, privacy is an issue. So you have to walk a fine balance. You have to be very deliberate in taking a look at those technologies to make sure that from a privacy standpoint, you're not being overly intrusive, but still bringing value to the tool.
Sure. Privacy, we hear a lot about that. In the United States, we have kind of a patchwork approach to regulating data and privacy, state by state. European Union obviously has the omnibus, the GDPR. China also now, and everyone's saying that we might be on the verge of this soon in the United States. So how would this affect a global business on the larger level like Schneider?
To be honest, Schneider, from their perspective, takes the least or the common denominator, the least common denominator, the most private.
The most private.
The most private. In the United States, I could do it much more. If we were just a U.S.-centric company, and I've worked for them in the past, there's much more you can do as far as monitoring what the behavior is on the network. But in a global company like Schneider, where you're taking that least common denominator,
you're already there.
We're already there.
And ahead of the
We're
curve.
already being cautious of the privacy of the employees, privacy of the customers.
Sure.
Working with our regulatory bodies, internally the attorneys who specialize in this area. We have a privacy officer based in Europe. Work closely with that office on just about every matter we work internally, because there's notification requirements, there's which we have to be very mindful of. But we take it to, I'd say, where we err on the side of the customer, we err on the side of the employee, to make sure we don't violate that.
Right.
It's a trust, and we don't want to violate that.
That's great to hear. Do you think other companies in the United States would be prudent to adopt a similar approach? Because you do get complaints that say it slows down business, it slows down production in order to have all of this auditing and regulation in place. Just wondering what your opinion is on that.
I think when you're taking the approach that you're helping your customer, you're protecting the customer's data, you're entrusted with your employees' data, it's not, doesn't slow you down quite as much as you might think. It's not a burden. It's a responsibility.
Yeah.
And if you look at it as a burden, then you'll never get there.
Right.
But it's really a responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's important for every business owner and every CEO to understand that data privacy and cybersecurity is a true responsibility in this day and age.
Sure.
I mean, it's protecting your customers and your employees, and it's a duty to every citizen in the country, in my opinion.
And it's a crown jewel. I mean, I think in every company, it's a crown jewel. Whether it's your employee data, whether it's your customer data, the last thing you want to do is violate that trust. You're entrusted with it, and take that extra time, put the extra security around it. And when you have a problem, you have to be transparent. You're going to have a problem. It's not a matter.
It's going to happen.
Yeah. So you just need to be transparent.
It's not if, it's when, right?
It's always when.
Yeah. So just curious, with these mergers and acquisitions that you're going through, I know that there's probably a lot of operational technology. What about cloud and Internet of Things devices? Do you manage any cloud and Internet of Things devices and security around those areas? Sure.
So we have global experts or experts that handle globally the cloud. So we want to be uniform. We don't want any one-offs. We're trying to stay away from that. Every time you have an exception, you have a risk. So we're trying to develop the right framework. It's a very innovative company, and the companies we acquire are very innovative. So having an option, more than just one, but having a few options for security and listening to the customer about how they want to operate and who they need to collaborate with, and the different type of repositories they need to get to, and the different cloud providers. We work with the cloud providers directly. So it helps us innovate. It helps our R&D teams still collaborate, but do it securely. And the big part of that is communication. There's a culture. I've dealt with it in two different companies now. There's a culture in the R&D environment to share, to collaborate, and need that openness and quick exchange, and they move quickly. So we have to respond quickly and provide that extra level of customer care, I should say.
Customer care and security, right? If you're developing a new product, it would be prudent to kind of put the cybersecurity in at the get-go.
Yeah, you have to bake it in the beginning.
In the beginning. So how much do you work? I mean, you're saying you work with the R&D teams a lot. I'm sure you talk to the CEO quite a bit and the board of directors. What are the best communication strategies you could suggest to other CISOs?
Communicate often. Communicate in different languages. Communicate in plain language. Use examples. I think when you're asking the CISO the CEO and the board to invest, it's a long-term investment. It's not a quick fix. Explaining that process and the roadmap is really important. And sizable investments only bring incremental change. but so it's and they build on each other. You can't start to be a level 4 in the NIST framework on day one. It's not going to happen. But you have to have a roadmap and explain where you're at on the roadmap, test it, and bring in the right process, the right technology, and the right people to really advance yourself along the life cycle.
As we're going into the second quarter of 2019, there's always talk about new technologies, new innovations, so much stuff out there that's just developing exponentially at the speed of light. How do you go about handling all of that from a security point of view?
Trying to slow it down from my standpoint. You can be inundated with information. You could be inundated with the next best whiz-bang tool and sold. You have to really kick the tires, make sure it's going to work. Know what where you're at on your roadmap from a technology standpoint, and look for those technologies. Look for the ones that fills that gap, and hopefully integrates well.
When you say fill that gap, though, are we talking about like a Band-Aid fix for this area, or are we talking about more of like a long-term gap that needs to be addressed?
Ideally, it's a more of a long term. It's you may have a short term need, but you want to have a partner that's going to be long term. Ideally.
So what does this look like from a day-to-day basis? I mean, how do you plan this out? How do you foresee the changes that are going to be coming down the line with all of these mergers and acquisitions and the innovation of the product that you are working on at Schneider Electric and all of the vendors? I mean, how many, assistants do you need, or, are you making PowerPoint presentations to show to the board? Are you just looking at numbers? I mean, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis?
Good question.
It sounds like a lot to organize and manage.
All the above. I think you have to look at the risk is wide. The footprint is the scope is wide. The risk can come from any direction. We've seen even our vendors, for instance, have security issues, and if they have a security issue, we have a security issue. But not just us, but other companies that use that vendor. So I think one of the biggest risks in any company is that when one of your security vendors have an issue, you have an issue. You've trained your staff, you've trained the company employees what to trust, and all of a sudden you can't trust them anymore.
Yeah.
So it becomes an issue. So then it's retraining, and you don't necessarily want to not work with that vendor anymore, because it's not, again, the question of it's not a matter of if, it's when. So it's a possibility. But you want to work with the vendor to work through the issue. Hopefully they'll communicate the resolution with you, and you can implement it quickly.
Is there some sort of liability clause in the fine print when you're working with a vendor where they take responsibility for anything that happens to you while you're using their product?
I think it happens upstream and downstream.
Okay.
That type of liability. So each contract's different with the vendor, but and each has a different level of risk depending how deep they are in your security program and what they do, the services they provide. Are they touching the crown jewel or aren't they?
Got it. Yeah.
But it depends. The liability, from a vendor standpoint, as Schneider as a customer, it varies. It just depends on what services they're providing for you.
So what do you think are the main threats that the United States is facing when it comes to cybersecurity today? Business level, national level, civilian level. You have a background in the FBI. You've worked in all sorts of verticals. What should we be paying attention to the most?
I think we need to listen to our vendors. We need to listen to our customers. I think we need to work collaboratively as a group with the governments globally. We work locally. I work with the FBI from time to time, just passing information. And they pass information to all the companies in the U.S. They've been very collaborative, but not just the FBI. Work with the French authorities. Work with all the European authorities. It's going to take a team effort to really stay on top of what the issues are and what the risks are in responding. Takes communication with our customers to be transparent. Quite frankly, just listening to the customer concerns and making sure that you respond to them quickly.
Good to know. Keep on fighting the good fight.
Do our best.
Yeah, we'll do our best. Thanks for coming down. Cybercrime Magazine is very dedicated to opening the pathways to communication between CISOs, for CISOs. Thanks very much to Fortinet for sponsoring this. And it was great having you down here today, Pat.
Thank you, Georgia. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.